Writing Intentionally show with Jenny Alberti and Tracey Brown. Join us as we talk all things writing and publishing, from insider secrets to our own author journeys. We are committed to providing a safe platform for women to share their stories, knowledge, and truth without fear of judgment, criticism, or betrayal. By coming together in the genuine spirit of collaboration, we provide opportunities for growth, healing, and transformation that benefit all women, both authors and readers alike. Our vision is to help our authors intentionally build an aligned legacy and portfolio that supports their mission as a woman, human being, and business owner. So, in this week's episode, we will be talking about how we are supporting our authors as they embark on the emotional journey of sharing their stories, and why it's important to have a structure in place when dealing with the unexpected things that emerge during the writing process. So, Jenny and I have talked about this quite a lot, actually, because as we have gone through our journeys with both Lunar Wisdom and with um, oh, where are my words? Quiet and
Quite in
badass.
badass. There we go.
There we go. We have actually we've found a number of situations that crop up as a part of the writing process for our authors, but we've also experienced a number of these situations or watched our co authors experience these situations as part of other author and book containers. And we have compared the kinds of support that have been offered with different publishers in our personal experiences versus what we have offered ourselves and what we see as a need to offer. And so today we really just want to dive into what we have taken on board, the lessons that we have learned from that, and how we're changing things when it comes to our new Wounded Women series. So, Jenny, what are some of the things that you particularly noticed in your author journey specifically, but also with your Quiet and Badass authors?
Yeah, so I think that for me, one of the things that came up when I was a contributing author was that yes, there was, there is support around the actual writing process, right? The actual brainstorming and getting the thoughts out of your head and onto paper. What there wasn't for me and from my experience was that there wasn't anything really truly supporting the things that were coming up and the way when when you're writing and you have to go back and revisit these things and put them on paper, you kind of relive them, and those emotions and those feelings and those fears and those thoughts just kind of bubble right back up to the surface as if you are living them again, even though you've moved past them. I mean, things could happen years and years, even decades ago, right? But it's like you're reliving them. And for me, one of the stories was actually, funny enough, one of the things that I talked about in Aligned Leaders was this feeling of betrayal that I had, and comparing this feeling that I had in the story that I was telling to a feeling that I had in a previous experience, and checking in, like, was this betrayal? Was I feeling this? And yes, I was. And I was writing that story, but I was also reliving it, and it made me feel extremely anxious, because then these feelings of, okay, well, who's betraying me next? Like, these things just kind of came up, and I started to get anxiety about it. Like, even though, I mean, 2016 and 2018, right? Like, I've moved past those particular situations, but I didn't know what to do. And it was scary, right? It was scary having to not only tell that story and have it published in the world, but now I was having to deal with it in my regular life again. So that was my experience in the first container, is not really knowing what to do with this and not being prepared, because I didn't know that I was going to have to deal with this, not being prepared for everyday life, because it's a very real thing that you have to deal with again, right? So then with Quiet and Badass, and I think I touched on this at least last week. The topic, embracing your uniqueness. I did not, as the person that thought of this book and wanted to bring this topic to the world, I did not think that some of the things that were going to be coming up were going to be as deep and as emotionally charged as they were for some of my authors. And I truly wish that I had the capability and I had the knowledge and the experience to be able to help them through that journey. And I feel as though they went through, I feel as though for me, I feel as though like I should have been able to provide more. I wish that I was able to provide more. So going from that book forward, it feels as though that this is something that I really truly feel responsible to provide for our authors from this point forward, is support in that emotional journey of all of these things that are going to come up, and truly provide this safe container where they can share their story and they can heal and they can, be fully supported in every step. So for me, that's why adding these, really important components is important.
Yeah. And I mean, I didn't have the exact same experience in Aligned Leaders, because I don't think I really touched on some of those deeper issues in my own story. It was more about, for me, it was very much about stepping out of the spiritual closet. But I do remember some of our other co-authors basically like hitting a wall when it came time for the book to launch, because they had shared some really vulnerable stories about trauma and things that had happened in their past that they had been working through, and even had perhaps had counseling over and sought help through. But as you go through that writing journey and that process, and we've definitely talked about this before in terms of, when you are writing the story, it's you and your computer. And then when you are send it off to the publisher for editing, it's just, again, like the editor providing feedback to you. It's still a one-on-one kind of relationship. So it still feels like a very sort of closed personal container. But then when the book is released into the public, it's out in the world and it's available for anybody to read, right? Like the people that you might have spoken about in your chapter, the things that, you're exposing those wounds for anybody to see. And that can be really confronting. And I recall watching one of our other co-authors that I had become like quite close with, and she almost basically shut down her business and retreated after the book came out, because it was like she'd had it was too much. It was too overwhelming having it go out into the world. And so I then watched through some of the other containers that I've been in with, a couple of, I did 3 other books before Lunar Wisdom. across a couple of different publishing houses, and some of them offered different support, but again, none of it really covered any of these vulnerabilities and these visibility issues that were coming up. And I'd spoken with another one of our aligned leaders, co-authors, who actually worked in visibility, and we had talked about how we saw this as an issue that needed to be addressed, and the kinds of things that were coming up. And so when I was putting together the Lunar Wisdom container, I very strongly felt like I needed to start providing some support for my authors in Lunar Wisdom from a visibility perspective, and like healing some of those blocks about putting their stories out into the world, because of what I had seen happen around me and some of the other authors that in the containers I'd been in. But I really feel like, combining your experiences with Quiet and Badass and what came up during the Lunar Wisdom containers, and how it, as a publisher, there's a completely different, I guess, duty of care, right?
Yeah.
Like, it's one thing to be an author in a container, it's one thing to be a co-author in a container and to see what is happening within the circle, right? And to either experience or not experience the level of support that you need in the container. But as a publisher, it's different, because you are trying to provide the support to help shepherd these authors through. And so because you and I had talked about this and what your authors had been through and what I watched happen going through my Lunar Wisdom container, we both recognized that when it came to the Wounded Women series, that we were actually really we knew this really early on, because this is why with the Heroine's Journey container, for the women who decide that they want to come on board and do all 3 books with us, we knew that that was going to not just be a transformational container in terms of how amazing it's going to be to heal these wounds, but actually we knew that we were going to need to hold a different kind of energetic space for what was going to come up for these women, because it's not just all sunshine and rainbows at the end. We knew that there was going to be a lot of stuff that was going to come up. And so we had already started to think about what that was going to look like and what support we were going to need to be bringing to the table.
Yeah. And it shows up in different ways too. So like for me, what I was just talking about in when I was doing Aligned Leaders, it was like this revisiting and this, kind of, I was, like I said, worried about, okay, is this going to happen again? Or, right. But it didn't stop me from actually writing. Like I continue to write. Right. But I know that for some of my women in Quiet and Badass, it was overwhelming and it prevented them from writing. And it was very challenging to continue to write the chapter, right? Obviously, everybody was able to work through that, but I wish that I was able to provide some support there so that it wouldn't be so hard. It wouldn't be so challenging, right? And then like you just described, the aftermath, like the after effect, it could also show up in that way where it's like, okay, they felt it, they wrote the chapter, they're dealing with it, but it's really taking over the rest of their life after. And I think that it's just so important, especially with what we're doing. And we're really talking about some really deep stuff. We have that responsibility. that responsibility, I truly feel as though, for us and for what we're doing and in this container, it's really important because of all those different ways that it could show up. So, yeah, not to say like that the writing support isn't important. Like we're going to do that as well. But I think that for this particular container in this book series, the focus more so on the support with, what's going to come up emotionally and all of the other ways that it can manifest and show up in their life, right?
Yeah.
I just like I really want to be able to provide more than the publishing and the writing experience, because it's so much more than that, right? It's so much more than that. It's so much more than what we see being marketed, like in promotion. It's so much more than that. It's so much more than, becoming a best-selling author. It's so much more than just growing your business with a book. It's so much more than making money with a book, right? It's like this entire journey that truly leads somebody to be in a better place in general, like with themselves and in life. And I think that is what we are really striving for, right? It's like this total experience every single time, every single container, whether it's the Wounded Women series or the next thing that we do. This will be part of what we do from this point forward, right?
Yeah. And so we are talking about the emotional journey and some of the things that some of the really exciting things that we have coming up for our authors are also being supported by other things that we had come up. So I really just want to touch on those first before we share some of the ways that we're providing that emotional support, because I think once we start diving into that, it's probably going to eclipse everything else. But I just really want to touch on the fact that it was also things like providing support with the tech stack as well. So while we're also, because that, even though that sounds really, I guess, businessy, the thing is that part of providing emotional support for the authors was also providing them with the tools and the resources that they needed to actually feel like they had everything in place to be able to market the book successfully, to be able to build their businesses, to be able to actually step up as experts in their field. Because and I know that this was one of the differences between your experiences with your quiet and badass authors and something that quite specifically came up with my Lunar Wisdom girls, was that some of my authors really didn't have, things like email lists in place or websites or even PayPal accounts and things like that, because they were at different places in their business or in, with their moon businesses and things like that, that meant that they needed extra additional support to be able to do that. Because in our author chat, like, there was a lot of angst and a lot of stress going on about, oh, but I don't have this and I need to do that and I need to do this before launch and I need to learn how to build a website and I need to sign up for WordPress and it was just, I could see this overwhelm building. And we were really lucky that Talisha, who has been a guest here on the podcast before, and has actually talked a little bit about some of the things that she put together, is one of the Lunar Wisdom authors, and she stepped into the breach and really helped the Lunar Wisdom girls to put together some really simple stuff with Linktree. And it took out so much of that overwhelm from that point of view, and really despite it being a very tech thing, provided a different level of emotional support as well as practical support. So it was practical business building stuff, but it provided that emotional level of support that they needed to be able to feel like they were then presenting themselves as experts in their field and doing all of the things right, and not having the peace of mind to know that they were ready to step up into launch, to become that industry expert, to do all of the things that they wanted and needed to do without feeling like that was another weight on them at the same time as they were writing their stories and as they were preparing for launch.
Yeah, it's such a good point, because when you know, it could be that that people are in different places in business, but it could also be that, like, that's just not your thing, right? Like, it's not your thing. That's not what you actually provide. And granted, yes, everybody that we work with are business owners, but still, there's different genius zones for different people. And if you have to do something that is outside of your genius zone, it can be extremely uncomfortable and overwhelming. And to have that level of support underneath it, right? Like, things that come up that, because you don't have that in place, you start to question, like, should I be doing this? Right? Or am I good enough to do this? Or is this really going to work for me? Or, just things continue to come up, this feeling of inadequacy, or, whatever it is. So, yeah, 100% agree with you. Like, what Talisha did and provided in terms of the technical stuff is 100% emotional support as well.
And I mean, it doesn't only apply to business owners. I mean, as authors, building our author platforms also
Yep.
requires having a bit of a tech stack, because you need to have the social media presences, or you need to have those things, because as we talked about when we spoke with Denise Duffield Thomas a few weeks ago, even if you're being traditionally published or whatever, the onus of marketing is on you. The onus of building your author platform is on you as an author. And so again, like, while we often talk about this in context of business owners, because we work a lot with business owners, what really we are talking about is it also from the perspective of building that author platform. So whenever we are talking about this, for those of you who obviously know us, you will hear us talk about author platforms all the time. But for those of you who might be new, these are interchangeable concepts for us. Like, when we talk about this, we are talking about author platforms, even if we talk about business owners, because it is such an intrinsic part of being a writer in general. Requires us to have these things in place, whether you are writing fiction, whether you are writing poetry, whether you're writing children's books, whether you are writing, nonfiction, whether it's academic, whether it's transformational nonfiction, whether it doesn't really matter what it is, you still need to have a way to be speaking to your readers and to your audience and creating those connections, and that, whether that's creating an email list to keep in touch with your readers, whether it is having social profiles or ways for people to contact you, whether it is being able to have links to Amazon to literally buy your book, right? Those things are all, can be overwhelming, trying to work that all out on your own and trying to wing it. And that's something that we really do feel very strongly is important to provide. And in none of the containers that I have been in with any other publisher has that been offered as a part of the container. Some of the containers that I have been in, some of the publishing houses I've worked with have offered additional services that you or consultations that you can book where you pay extra to maybe like map out an offer or to do the things, but actually none of them have really ever delved into the the depth of building the author platform. Like some of them will talk about why it's important to get visible, why it's important to go on social media or go live and talk about the book, and they'll possibly give you journal prompts or something and say, here are like 8 days worth of topics to go live on, or things like that. But it doesn't ever really go past that surface visibility stage and into, here are the practical things that you need as an author, as a business owner, to be able to market your book, to be able to make money in your business, to be able to connect with your readers, and in the way that we have decided to approach things. Because, this is, like with your launch list, Jenny, and the way that you approached your launch to make money off the back of it, it very much delved into this needing to make that personal connection with the readers, making that personal connection with your network to actually be able to leverage the book. And as we've seen that play out with our Quiet and Badass authors and Lunar Wisdom authors, and how they've then applied these learnings, it has really highlighted for us the importance of having these pieces in place to support them as business owners and as authors, to have those tools and resources in place. And I think it's easy to underestimate, because it just sounds like more business coaching, right? Like, we'll help you build your launch list, we'll help you create your book funnel, we'll help you do these things. And it sounds very, like academic, very, like whatever. But I think that it's very easy to underestimate how important providing those services are to the emotional support of the writing journey.
Yeah, well, just the visibility topic by itself, right? Like, not only do you need a practical strategy and a way to implement the strategy, a way to get visible, a way to market the book, a way to make money, right? But the underlying blocks that you may have, or that may come up while you start writing, or, and especially with our topics, right? Like, visibility for women traditionally is like, that's a no-no, right? Like, be afraid of that, right? So there's these things that people are going to be writing about, and things that are going to be bubbling up, whether they're writing for the Wounded Women series or some other topic. Like, visibility is just a thing, right? It's like a thing for us that we need support around. And providing the strategy and the actual teaching people how to do that, if that's not their jam and they don't really know how to do it, right? And just supporting every stage of this thing is just, it's so important to me that we provide on that high level. And yeah. Do you want to talk about how we're doing that? Do you want to get into that?
Absolutely. So we've already name dropped Talisha, and I'm going to drop her right in it now, because she...
Well, wait, hold on. Wait, before we get into that, like, it's not us that's doing this, right? It's like, well, definitely not me, because I was just like, yeah, I'm Quiet and Badass, I couldn't help him. And I'm not here like, oh yeah, I'm going to help you now because I just had this experience. No. So that's something that we are very, like, we for sure want to be serving at this high level, that we recognize at least I speak for myself, I recognize that this is not my genius zone. I am not going to be able to provide emotional support and releasing of things and traumas and this and that. It's not going to be me, but I am smart enough to go find someone that can do that. And so that is what we have done, right?
Yes. So where I was going with that was that we have been very lucky that in both of our containers we have had some incredible authors step up with skills that they have, to provide support in different kinds of ways, depending on what it is. And so we've talked, in fact, we've actually had here on the show a number of our authors who have done different things. Like we've talked several times about the amazing Christina Sims and the PR work that she has done with the Quiet and Badass Girls, because she stepped up and she was like, these are the skills I bring to the table, and this is how I can help you to get some visibility, to leverage the Quiet and Badass book launch. And she managed to get several of your authors amazing publicity features, which, if anybody is curious, if you go to womenwritingintentionally.com, you can actually find on there a page of our authors in the press, and you can actually check out all of the articles. And those were all ones that the amazing Christina did help to get all of the Quiet and Badass authors like out there sharing their stories and their expertise. And so we're super excited to have Christina coming on board formally to help work with our authors as we move forward with the Wounded Women series, with our solo authors who are writing their entire books, and all of those different things to help build that publicity side of things and get that exposure, because that is, again, part of working out how to leverage the book and really leaning into your expert authority and how you're perceived, and expanding your author platform, right? And so Christina has been amazing. We've had our beautiful Ruth step up, one of my Lunar Wisdom authors. She's coming on board as our chief editor, and she ran an amazing how to self-edit workshop with my Lunar Wisdom girls, where she walked them through and told them how they could go through their own manuscripts before submitting it to us as publishers, to help them try and make sure that they were providing the best possible version of their manuscripts the first time around. Right. And so she's now coming on board as our chief editor and running our editing team, because we see those skills and we value those skills, and we adore her. And why would we not want to work with the people in our circles who are absolutely amazing at what they do? By the same token, and I mean, so with Lunar Wisdom, in some of the other author containers, I've previously run moon circles in the lead up to the launches of other books. And I love running circles. But one of my beautiful Lunar Wisdom authors, Talisha, who we've talked about before and who we've had on the podcast as well, she runs these incredible circles, because she also, one of her modalities is in embodiment and movement. And I found personally, she invited the Lunar Wisdom authors to join her, I think it was her New Moon Circle, which was just before, she ran it the night before Lunar Wisdom launched. And it was absolutely incredible. I've never been to a women's circle like that before, incorporating the movement aspect of things. And I found, like, especially in the lead up to launch, like I was carrying so much tension in my shoulders, and the opportunity to move through that really was so beneficial for me. And I've been to a couple of Talisha's other circles since then. And they are absolutely phenomenal, because she doesn't only bring in the moon aspect or whatever, but they're there is a lot of catharsis that comes with releasing in different ways. Like there is a lot of emotion that comes up through this embodiment and through this conscious movement. And again, so excited to have Talisha coming on board for Wounded Women to provide a regular circle once a month throughout this journey over this next 12 months, particularly for the women who are coming into the heroine's journey and doing the full 12 months, but also I think for those who come into the individual containers while they're in that writing process, being able to have access to these circles, because in addition to the circle, she's also providing some movement sessions which are going to be exclusive to the Heroine's Journey container. There will be this opportunity for like a 30-minute session, I believe, once a week to just really help release the stored emotions that are in the body, right? Because we do carry, like the tension in our shoulders, or like the stiffness in our lower backs, or the tension in our jaws, that we aren't necessarily even conscious of. And it might not sound like anything particularly phenomenal in and of itself. Like when I say, oh, movement classes, you might be like, I don't even know what those are. But having experienced them myself, like I've raved about them, haven't I, Jen? I've talked about them lots. And so, again, it is exactly what you were saying a minute ago, Jenny, about finding the people who have the skills, even if they're not necessarily, like movement is not my jam. Like I can run a moon circle, but I can't do what Talisha does in the way that she does it. And to have her coming on board to help provide that somatic support, as well as opportunities for safe spaces to be vulnerable in a different kind of way, where there is a lot of release work going on, I think is going to be a complete game changer. But in addition to that, because she is also a tech whiz, she's coming back on board to help with the basic tech funnel stuff as well. So she's going to be running some tech Q&As so she'll be providing some training videos in our author portals for all of our authors to be able to access if they need to start building things like link trees, or if you want to, learn how to build your website and things like that. We do have some of those things available. Like if you need to build a website, that she runs an amazing separate workshop for that. But we will be running these, particularly again for the Heroine's Journey, there will be co-working sessions, opportunities to come together, whether you want to be doing writing, whether you want to be building your tech stack and your author platform and things like that. But also these tech Q&As where you can, if you're having trouble implementing any of the things that are in the training portal, or you've got questions on how to set up your email list and do those things, she will be running those sessions to provide that support for the people who need it, depending on where they're at in their journeys.
So I just want to say, the things that we are providing, the things that we are, including in our containers, they are for a very specific type of woman, right? Who, yes, everybody has different goals and they have a different vision for themselves and their business and whatnot. But because our container, it really is different, because you and I do research.
So much research.
Like, literally, we are literally always always researching, right? So we know that what we are doing is very different, but it's also geared towards a specific type of woman, a woman that really wants to build a legacy. Like, not just talk about it, not just like, oh, this is a cool thing to say, this is a cool thing to use as a marketing, use as marketing. Actually, like, this woman actually wants to step into a much higher frequency, a much higher level of impact. And we are providing a container that backs that up. Whereas a lot of what we see out there will say that, but doesn't back it up, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that's also important to me, right? Because that's who I am. And like Paula Abdul says, like, or like the opposite of what Paula Abdul says, which is opposites attract. I really have always believed that we attract people that are like ourselves. And those are the women that we want to work with. And so we provide a container that supports that, that's going to help those specific women. So those are the women that we are looking for to come into the Wounded Women series. And for every series and every book and every project that we do, every retreat that we do, everything that we do from this point forward is for that woman that really truly wants to step into this higher frequency and provide a higher impact. So yes, we are backing that up, aren't we?
Absolutely. And I absolutely love what you're saying there about the kinds of women that we want to bring into our container being like a different caliber of woman, because you really need to not just write a book and share your story, but you have to really want to create that long lasting impact in a way where you are willing to do the work, right? Because this isn't going, like, it's not all just going to be like amazing, let's all ascend to the 5D and live in like love and light, because that's not what healing journeys look like. And if you know me at all, you'll know that I'm a big supporter of calling out spiritual bypassing and pretending like everything's okay when it's not. And part of doing the work and healing, like particularly in the Wounded Women series, healing these wounds, healing the sister wound, healing the mother wound, healing the witch wound, healing the healer wound, dealing, like, in order to heal those things, like Jenny was saying earlier about, we have to relive them. We have to go back through these experiences. And even if we are reliving them with the intent to reframe them and find the silver lining in them, or the lesson, or the transformation, or the gold dust, or whatever it is that you're pulling out of that experience, the fact of the matter is that you still have to dive back into that experience, and that can take you back to some really complex places. And that brings things up. And one of the things that, that I know for sure, and I'm speaking on both, understand how important it is to have the support of somebody who sees you and is willing to hold space for you, even on the days when things are hard, even on the days when you feel like burning everything to the ground, even when you feel like you are the worst possible incarnation of yourself. Having somebody be there and be like, I love you anyway, and I see you, and I'm still willing to hold space for you. And help you work through it. Like, just witness your journey, because that kind of safety, that kind of trust, that level of trust, that ability to be able to completely surrender to being vulnerable isn't something that is easily found in most containers. And this is something that is pivotal for us, that we feel very strongly and passionately about providing for our authors as well, and being able to give each and every woman who is ready to step up and really dive into these vulnerable places and say, like, we are here for you, and we are committed to finding and bringing the tools and resources to the table that we know that you're going to need. Because even if we don't personally have the skills to do that, we will find the people that we know you need to, like, be exposed to or have in your life. So, these are the women that we are looking for, are the kinds of women who are ready to step up.
Yeah, that is just insane. I can't. Sorry, Tracey.
It's all good. So yeah, like, we want the women who are ready to be able to say, like, full body, yes, I want to be involved in this. Yes, I'm ready to do the work. Yes, I want to use this opportunity to build my author platform, to build my business, to change my life, because I know that I am ready to build that aligned legacy and portfolio, and I am ready to step into the incredible woman that I was always meant to become. And I know that I'm going to be safe embarking on that journey with you.
Yeah, the vulnerability. Because, like you said, you could just, there's tons of people that like provide the ability to contribute to a multi-author book, right? And you can pay a couple $100 and you can write your chapter and submit it, and then you become published, and it's all good, right? But we want the women that are truly trying to become the next best version of themselves. And in order to do that, they have to be vulnerable. Like, both you and I have had to be extremely vulnerable. We've had to drop our egos. We've had to be open to growth. We've had to, be willing to do the work, and that, we've provided a safe space for each other to be able to build this business. And that is exactly what we are going to be providing to all of our authors this, in Betrayed, in the series. And he just knocked over his cat tree. So anyway, it's time to wrap this up, because my cat may destroy the entire house, and I feel tied to this computer.
So lovely ladies. Thank you for joining us again for another episode of the Women Writing Intentionally show. If you have resonated with anything that we have said during this episode today, and you would like to find out more about being part of Betrayed or the Wounded Women series, if you would even just like to talk with us about what it might look like to be a part of our containers, or what kind of support you need as an author, if you have a solo book even, because we do have, like, we've had some of the women in our circles approach us and say, hey, do you do solo books? Yes, we do solo books. Like, if you want to write your own book, we will still provide these same kinds of levels of support. And in fact, we do have other levels of support that we offer our solo authors as part of their writing journey, that if you want to know more about that, please get in touch with us. Slide into one of our direct messages, or, pop an application in at womenwritingintentionally.com to be a part of the Wounded Women series, or a part of Betrayed, or if one of the other titles, if Burned or Broken, resonates for you more, pop your application in, because as we've mentioned before, we do have some early bird bonuses that are available for the first 3 women in each of the different levels for each book. So if you know that one of those books resonates for you, don't be afraid to dive in. Say yes to yourself and say yes to the journey, because we would love to start supporting you straight away. And we are really excited with the caliber of women who have already stepped up and started submitting their applications. We are thrilled to already be sending out contracts to some of our authors, and we know that this is going to be a phenomenal container. We know that the stories that are going to be shared are going to be so powerful, not just because they will inspire others, but also because they will give you the opportunity to really dive deep into your own stories and release and let go of the things that no longer serve you, but also to reframe and find that gold dust that is going to allow you to become that best version of yourself, because you can unlock new levels of who you are and who you were meant to be. So, do you have any final words of wisdom that you want to share with us today, Jen?
I don't.
No. Okay. Well, join us again next week. We will have another episode of the Women Writing Intentionally show for you. And have an amazing evening. Thank you for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you again.